Welcome back to Dota, that is. I've been hearing a lot of people that have taken hiatuses, breaks of sorts from Dota, and they have come back and they are seeing the game and they don't even recognize what they see with their eyes. And that's what this video is all about, is we're going to take a brief trip back in history to hopefully quickly crash course you guys back into the game of Dota 2. Now let's get started.
Banana slam jam.
So on our first step back in history, we are going to November 2020, patch 7.23, where neutral items were added. Now, neutral items are items that drop when you kill jungle camps, people. You get rewarded for farming. They drop in tiers, so there's tier 1 through 5, and they start to drop at specific times in the game. Tier 1s drop at 7 minutes, Tier 2s drop at 17 minutes, Tier 3 drop at 27 minutes, Tier 4 at 37 minutes, and Tier 5, the in-game get me out of here items, drop at 60 minutes. Now, these items increase in power on average from Tier 1 all the way up to Tier 5, and they have a 10% chance to drop from a neutral creep every single time that you kill them. The biggest thing about these items for note is that you can only use one of them, and that each one offers little unique bonuses. A bit of mobility, a bit of damage, survivability, sustain, cast range, a bunch of little fun things that are not game-breaking for the most part. And these are things that you'll learn, they're almost like poker hands. You know, you'll kind of learn to see, based on what I have, or what hero I'm playing, this is the neutral item that I will want to use. So don't panic too much about what each and every one of them does. Take your time noticing, this one gives me some armor. Oh, that sounds nice this game. I am dying to physical damage. Or this one gives me some mana regen. I need that mana regen. And you'll slowly but surely get better at picking which one is best for you. But most importantly, let's make sure that we send the neutral items back to base and that we pick them up when they drop. So there are going to be times where you already have a neutral in your inventory, and you are farming the neutrals, as you see the Bloodseeker doing here, and one of the creeps is going to drop a neutral. It's really important to get in the habit of picking up the second neutral and then choosing which one that you want. So in this case, he's choosing between 8 intelligence, 2 armor, and kind of a miniature mana boot, or some all stats that give him some move speed but disable him while he's doing it. That's what he's choosing, and since Bloodseeker is much more of a movement speed stat-based hero, he's going to elect to swap the items and then send the Arcane Ring back to base. So if you want to send your neutrals back to base, all you have to do is right-click them. It'll give you a menu, and you simply click Teleport to Neutral Stash. If you want to see all the neutrals that your team has, you can go to the Shop Neutral tab. It'll show you which neutral has dropped this game and also which hero on your team is holding the respective neutrals. Just make sure you're not a neutral hoarder. For our next change, we want to mention the dynamic of supports and how they have changed since you last saw them. Now, back in my day, supports were position 7s. They had brown boots at 30 minutes and they had absolutely no impact on the late game. But now, supports have impact. Team fights and team mechanics have become a much more important thing. 1v9ing really is a thing in the past, but why, BSJ? Why has that happened? Well, let's talk about it. First off, there's no more courier purchasing at the start of the game. There's 5 couriers, 1 for each and every one of you, and you get your own personal minion that's going to carry your items. Wards cost 0 gold. Spoiler alert, cores can actually buy themselves their own wards if they want to protect themselves while they're farming. Also, sentries now only cost 50 gold, and when you kill an observer ward, you get more than 100 gold, and it scales over the course of the game. So all these things combined, plus neutral items, supports just have a lot more tools to work with. So since you guys left, there have been numerous new heroes added, and let me tell you something about these new heroes. You're going to learn a lot of them on your own as you play, but they are incredibly mobile. There has been a lot of power creep in regards to mobility in Dota, and that's just something super important for you to know, that you're going to see a lot of heroes zip, zap, zooping all over your screen. Let's just check out a couple of them to show you exactly how mobile these new heroes can be. Okay. So over time, there have been a lot of quality of life updates, especially to the UI, as well as just visual things that you guys can keep an eye out to give you a better understanding of what's happening in the current Dota game that you're playing. So first and foremost, when it comes to UI, you have a backpack now, guys. What a backpack does is it allows you to have extra slots in your inventory that you're not currently using. So say we have full slots in the lane as a carry, and we have regen, and we wanted to have a salve, but we don't need to use it right now. That's exactly what the backpack is for. These 3 items that are in these 3 slots are disabled at the current time, but you can swap them in and they will go on cooldown. If you swap them out of your backpack, they will be on a 6-second cooldown, and then you can use them immediately after that. Now you see the extra neutral item slot that every hero has. We have that slot. We also have teleport scrolls in their own slot. So you're going to have to add some new hotkeys, guys. As you go to the hotkeys tab, and there's going to be new hotkeys for these. Make sure you have these set, otherwise you will be not using your active abilities on your neutral items, and you will also be forgetting to teleport. Now, in regards to teleport scrolls, the new change also is that Boots of Travel are an item that, just like before, give you lower cooldown TPs that let you TP to creeps, but they now share the cooldown with your teleport scroll, and they don't use a teleport scroll. So they are effectively the same, but yet they are different when it comes to your UI. So notice if I TP, my teleport scroll goes on cooldown, and I use the teleport scroll from the hotkey of the teleport scroll rather than Boots of Travel having their own hotkey. Next up is that when heroes buy Acceptors, they have a nice little glow underneath their hero. See the difference there? When we move the Acceptor out of our inventory, nothing below us, but when we do have one, there's a nice little blue glow. So it's a nice indicator for you, for allies or enemies, of whether or not they have an Acceptor upgrade. There have been a lot of late game additions to items, such as Blink Daggers getting upgrades. So what that means is a lot of items that you previously did not want to buy early on in the game, because as a carry you'd run out of slots, is you now have Overwhelming Blink, which is a Strength Blink, you have Agility Blink, which is the Swift Blink, and you have an Intelligence Blink, which is the Arcane Blink, which is generally really good respectively for any hero of those categories. You can read up on those more later. Now, if you go way too far back, something that has been added to the game is the idea of status resistance, as you see in Sange and Yasha. Currently, it is only on a neutral item, Sange and Yasha, and Sange and Kaya. What status resistance means is that any slow, silence, stun, any negative status effect on your hero will be reduced by that amount of time. Now, usually most spells will do the same amount of damage, but it prevents you from being kited and controlled nearly as much as you used to be. So you see that 20% status resistance is something you can only get from Sange items. So in the past, items like Veil were specifically made to make it so that you would buff up your team's magic damage. But if we look at these items, we see that Veil says, cast a 600 radius blast that causes enemy heroes to take 18% increased damage from spells. Now the keyword being spells. Now if we look at Kaya, which is another item that's been added in the last few years, it says 16 intelligence, 8% spell amplification. Now this is important to note that these apply to all spells in the game. It used to be that int heroes or intelligence-based heroes wouldn't really scale as well because there was no way to buff up the magic damage or the pure damage or the physical damage that their spells were doing. So now there's a lot more late-game carry-esque heroes that scale by use of spells. Examples are Puck is a hero that used to kind of fall off 3 or 4 years ago, but now with the addition of these insane spell damage items, she can carry much later on into the game. But this spell damage buffs everything that is not an actual attack, people. So it buffs item procs like Maelstroms and Shivas. It buffs all 4 of your spells, no matter what type of damage they are. And so keep in mind that you can be a lot more flexible with your builds nowadays. Certain heroes can scale very differently than simply right-clicking people to death. There have been all types of new items added since you guys last played. Let's just do this. There's a second tier of Helm of the Dominator, which lets you take over ancient creeps. There's an upgrade to Yules, which lets you use it on your allies. There is an upgrade to drums that is combined with Tranquil Boots, which gives you an upgraded version of the drums that prevents you or your team from being slowed for 1.5 seconds. There is a second upgrade to Maelstrom, not just Mjolnir, that becomes an AoE root on all enemies, as you see there. There is a magic damage right-clicking item where, similar to a Hurricane Pike, you can cast it and make it so your next 5 attacks are all magic damage, and this is really strong late game against heroes with high armor. E-Blade has been completely reworked. If we look at the components of E-Blade, it is now a Kaio, which is the spell damage item, the Ghost Scepter, and a recipe. It is no longer a Morphling agility hero item. It is all about a spellcaster hero type item nowadays. Bloodstone is the new int hero Satanic, pretty much unpurchasable on most heroes at the time being, but it is no longer the suicide or mana regen based item. Nullifier is an item that purges all positive debuffs on the opponent team consistently. So if you're dealing with Ghost Scepters, Yule Scepters, heroes with buffs from their abilities, you can purge them with Nullifier. And there is a new item, somewhat new, Eon Disc, that basically serves as a way to prevent yourself from getting bursted full to 0. When you hit a specific health threshold, the Eon Disc will proc, and it will prevent all damage that you take for 2.5 seconds. So if you're dealing with some sick combos that seem impossible to dodge, there's now more late game options to deal with those. Now, something that you guys definitely missed if you're returning to Dota is the addition of Aghanim's shards. So on your UI, you will see if you're able to buy, if you have already bought an Ag Scepter. You can also see it on one of your teammates' UI, and it will also tell you what your Aghanim Scepter does when you mouse over it. Now, also, every hero has been given that precious Aghanim Shard. Now, the Aghanim Shard is in your shop right here. It costs 1,400 gold. You can only buy it once. It does not take up an item slot, and you can start purchasing it at 15 minutes. Now, it's really important to note that these shards do not give you any stats. They don't give you anything other than what they specifically upgrade in one of your spells. So some shards are game-breaking and completely change the way heroes play. Most shards are more of luxury upgrades. They make a spell do slightly more damage. They give you a stun on a spell that lasts a bit longer. They give you a save on a spell that you didn't previously have. They're nice upgrades that can add a facet to your game, but you have to be cautious because since they don't give any stats, they can't necessarily just be auto-purchased. But it's important to note that they are in the game. They help certain heroes scale way harder. Some heroes' shards are very bad. And just having a general idea of how often the shards are bought on the heroes you're playing is quite important. Now, I want to give you guys a brief update on the Dota 2 map, especially how it's played in the current year. So, first and foremost, the game starts as nighttime and turns into daytime at minute 0. So we're going to go ahead and start our game. So it's going to be day. And I want to talk about generally the way the map is envisioned. I don't have time to explain it to you guys exactly why, but I want you to trust me, go into your games with this idea and you'll see for yourself. I've given you the answer. You can now work it, reverse engineer it, okay? So basically, carries are no longer about going straight to the triangle as soon as possible to increase efficiency. Carry meta has developed in a way where carries realize they have to help defend their towers and participate in potential defensive plays especially, which means there's the dead lane concept, which means the bottom lane is dangerous and the top lane is where you get stuff done safely, is still in play, but the interpretation is quite different. So carries will generally try to stay in their own jungle and bottom lane and mid lane on Radiant, and their own jungle with top lane and mid lane on Dire. They try to stay here as long as they possibly can, okay? Now, it's not that they just kill themselves over and over again, but the idea is if they stay there, it's objectively better for the entire team to farm more. Now, what that means is that since carries are no longer rotating to this area and this area nearly as early on Dire, and this area and this area on Radiant, that's leaving a lot more time and space for offlaners to farm. Offlaners actually have a lot more impact and net worth distribution now than they did years ago. So what that means is that a lot of the offlane heroes, almost half of them are just carries. You see Razors off lanes, Viper off lanes, you see Alchemist off lanes sometimes right now, and they're not carries in the sense that they buy carry items and try to carry the game. They're carries in the sense that they need a little bit more farm for the first 15, 20 minutes, and they're going to scale with farm. Offlaners are still meant to play farm incredibly aggressively, but they're no longer the brown boots, blink dagger, go gank people kind of offlaners. Every core role in the current year is a farming core role. It just kind of determines, or it kind of depends on how aggressively you are supposed to farm in order to invade the opponent. Now, the mid laner, the biggest update about the mid lane is that there are water runes at 2 minutes and 4 minutes. So what these water runes give access to is the fact that you have tons of bottle refills. Both mid laners are going to get them most of the time. There's bounty runes at 3 minutes that a lot of mid laners go for. And there's also the small camp. Okay, so the small camp being right next to mid lane allows mid laners to just inject net worth into themselves. A lot of mid laners prioritize their own farm rather than shutting down the enemy mid, and so that they'll hit these insane timings by like 7-8 minutes in, and then they'll start running around the map. Okay, so the mid lane is all about sustained farming and making sure you get what's yours, so you come online faster than the other two cores in the other 2 lanes. And then you can gank these farming offlaners and these defensive farming carries. So if you guys are making sure you don't miss out on the meta and you want to get yourself right back into it as quickly as possible, let's understand that I've probably overwhelmed you at this point. And the most important thing that you guys can do coming back to Dota or just learning anything new in Dota is isolating factors, making sure as much of it is on autopilot as we can so that we can focus on the things that matter. So before you jump right back into Dota, if you're really trying to grind and get back on that ranked MMR horse as soon as possible, you should check out websites like Dota 2 Pro Tracker and Dota Buff, which will show you some nice trends. See how on Dota 2 Pro Tracker, there's a top heroes tab. I can vouch that I see these heroes in pretty much every game that I am playing at the current moment. So based on whatever role that you are, you should look at these heroes on this list, click the one that you want to play, in this case, Void Spirit, and you'll be given the most common ability build, starting items, top item build, and you should just copy paste this stuff so that you're making sure you're doing what's right, and kind of as you're playing, you're going to get a feel for why it's right. And you can do this on any hero you play, but let's not have to do the rocket science ourselves, people. If you're coming back to Dota, you are trying to catch up on years of developed strategy that you have not been a part of. And these players have been playing 12 pubs a day just for you. And there's tons of resources just like this, but I highly recommend Dota 2 Pro Tracker. You can check out any hero that you want. Copy paste these item builds, copy paste the skill builds, and go have fun. I mean, it's really that simple. Go have fun, because as long as you're doing the basic things correct, such as item builds, map play, understanding neutral items, all that kind of stuff, Dota's eventually gonna get you back on track. Now, that's what this video is all about, is the crash course to getting back to where you once were in your prime. The last thing I would like to know before I wrap this up is that players have gotten a lot better. Now, what that means is if you were 4K 3 years ago and you haven't played, please be realistic with yourself. Enjoy Dota, but expect the fact that you will probably be 1 to 2K MMR lower now than you were before. And that's not because you're worse, necessarily. You will be a bit worse because you took time off, but it's because everyone else is better. So don't take MMR as a constant over time, because at the end of the day, I know, I can vouch, if you improve slowly over time, you'll end up being about the same MMR, because that's what everyone's doing. So if you want to get back to where you were, you will have to be better than you were before. But good luck, guys. I hope you enjoyed my welcome back to Dota You Suck video. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Before I'm done here, I actually want to mention, if you want to have tools from me, I have my entire fundamentals course where I talk about hotkey setups, CS mechanics, general understanding of map objectives that will help you guys ease in to settings you may have missed, as well as just overall strategy that makes the game easier to play.